everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today in Terraria, we are looking at an event from the Spirit mod. This event is called the Tide, and as you might be able to tell, it is themed around the ocean biome. Much like any event in Terraria, it features its own enemies, special drops, and even a really cool mini-boss at the end that is a huge challenge. Now, this video isn't a direct guide on how to beat the Tide, such as my Scaribus and Vinewrath Bane videos, but it's more on what the event contains and my opinions on it. Now, without further ado, let's jump right into it. Now, the Tide, unlike the Pumpkin or Frost Moon, does not contain any waves of enemies, but works similarly to the Goblin Invasion. Each enemy counts for 1 point, including the beefier looking ones. Speaking of stronger enemies, they slowly start to appear as the percentage for the fight goes up, leading up to a tough but pretty fair mini-boss fight. This mechanic is a bit different from the Goblin Invasion, as it has an enemy point system and has the big bad mini-boss at the end of the fight. Now, the Tide is a post-Skeletron but pre-Starplate Voyager, a Spirit mod boss, event. This means that loot from the underworld, dungeon, and even new spirit materials are available to yourself. Personally, I like to use the Slag Tyrant armor along with the Slag Turn Staff, which are made from slag, which is a underworld material, and the Skeletalon Staff. The Slag Tyrant armor is a summoner friendly armor set, which increases your summon damage and number of minions, and has a set bonus of when you double tap down, it increases the damage of your sentries. The Slag Turn Staff lobs out a fireball at the closest enemy, having a chance to set them on fire, and is a direct upgrade to a Briar staff that has a similar effect. Now, the Skeletalon Staff is a drop from the Ancient Avian, from a video coming up soon, that summons 2 tiny versions of the Avian that rush towards the enemy and ram into them. Even with all this gear, the Tide is an event that should not be taken lightly, with enemies shooting many projectiles and doing insane contact damage if you're not careful. Having buff potions and lots of regen options for this event is what I would recommend for someone who is newer to expert mode or just this mod in general. Enough with the sort of baby talk here. To summon this event, you need to grab a Sea Break Pearl, which is crafted from 5 coral and 10 bones at an anvil, and use it at an ocean at any time of day. The event starts off with tiny coconut looking boys called Kakamoras that come up from the ocean and down from the sky. There are 6 different types of Kakamoras, including the plain Kakamoras, the Kakamora Bruisers, a contact damaging enemy, Kakamora Wind Gliders, Kakamoras that float down and heal all damage they withstood when they hit the ground, Kakamora Guards, enemies that sometimes shield themselves and act like the bucket head zombies in Plants vs. Zombies, Kakamora Lobbers, enemies that throw wooden javelins at you, and the Kakamora Shaman, are Kakamoras that use magic damage against you. Now, all the Kakamoras have a chance to drop a coconut gun or a tiki javelin, but the Shaman has a chance to drop not just that, but also stream scales and a weapon called the Shankya. At around 35% of the event, a dinosaur-looking creature called the Crocosaur will start to spawn. Its only drop is a bag o' bait, which is a Crocosaur mount, but it's pretty good. At around 50% of the way in, a jellyfish called the Mango War, nice pun there buddy, spawns in. It floats upwards and out of the water and charges up a laser attack that eventually releases, as you can see by the increase in the glowing of it. They are also able to drop the Shankya, or Shakya, but also have a chance to drop a summoner staff called the Mango Jelly Staff, which I'll talk more about later. Also around 50%, creatures called Bubble Brutes appear, which have large shells on them and shoot out bubble-like projectiles. They have a chance of dropping a Bubble Blaster, which is a magical gun weapon, and stream sails, just like the Kakamora Shaman. After 99 enemies have been defeated, the Relian spawns in, an eldritch squid creature with powerful magic attacks. These attacks include, but are not limited to, a pillar of purple particles, which are preceded by purple tentacles popping out of it, 8 purple magical beams that lock onto while being summoned, and an attack eerily similar to the rainbow swords the Empress of Light shoots out at you during its bullet hell phase. Now, after you defeat the Relian, it can either drop the Brine Barrage, which is a melee weapon, or the Tome of Rely. It also has a chance of dropping a mask and a trophy, which are pretty good. The Tide contains an abundance of both useful and not as useful items, the Javelin, and in the end, the challenge is worth the spoils. To start with, the Bag-O Bait summons a Crocosaur, which is the same size as the enemy, and has a max speed of 46 MPS. Now, compared to the Frostbark boots, which cap out at around 30 to 35 MPS, this mount is a clear and great upgrade. The mount also goes to straight max speed when dashing, and is weapon friendly, which brings in a lot of new boss strategies. Now, not just that, but I also really like the just feel of riding a dinosaur that goes pretty fast. You know, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool. So my final rating for this would probably be a 4 out of 5, as it's both useful and fun looking. The Brine Barrage is a melee weapon that works a bit like a flail. However, you are able to throw out multiple tips at a time, and it has 0 knockback. It also caps out at around 95 DPS. Now, personally, this weapon is pretty good when it's just by itself, but when it's paired up with both either runes or summoned weapons, it really starts to shine. Now, I can see this totally being able to destroy the Starplate Voyager, and to me that seems really crazy. So I really want to just give this weapon a 5 out of 5, but unfortunately I'd say it goes to a 4 out of 5, just because compared to some of the other insane weapons, it has a bit lower DPS than most. Now, the Tome of Rely is a magical tome that is similar to the Bloodthorn, a 1.4 weapon magical dropped by the blood shark creatures. I don't remember what they're called. And where it spawns tentacle spears from the surface of where the cursor is aimed. This weapon caps out at around 140 DPS. Now, personally, I don't really like this kind of weapon, since it really has a really terrible range and is only good for like kind of like just single enemy use or like group that is like isolated. But I'm sure there's some kind of like other use out there that somebody will abuse and it'll just be insane. So I'm going to rate this weapon at around a 3 out of 5, since while it does have a really decent DPS, is lacking in what I'd call usefulness. The Tiki Javelin, wait for this, is a melee weapon that's also sort of like a throwing weapon and has a special mechanic, being able to charge up its trajectory and velocity. Its DPS caps around at about 85, and it's the most common weapon to get from the Tide. Now, you thought the Rely was bad? This is terrible. Sure, it's like, it has a really unique property, but it's so slow that it's only useful for group things like the Tide or another group event, as it can, like, sure, pierce enemies, but you can only throw like one every, like, what, 3 or 4 seconds. Now, this is a really big downer, as I was really looking forward to this, but when I found out its real use, I kind of got disappointed. So I personally rate this at a 2 out of 5. While it has mostly downside qualities, I really appreciate the unique direction they took. Now, on a much better note, the Coconut Gun is a gun that shoots out 3 coconuts. It is considered a ranged weapon, but does not require any ammo at all. Its DPS caps around 120 to 140, depending on what you use. Now, compared to the Javelin, this is a huge upgrade. It is so good. For ranged, even this without armor, it goes up to 120 to 140 DPS, which is really insane, and shoots out 3 coconuts that all do a lot of damage. Now, yeah, as I said, personally, this is really good to me, and since it doesn't require any ammo, it just bumps it that far away up. So, personally, I would say that this gun has a 5 out of 5 rating, as not only does it have a good use, and has a great DPS, but might also be a reference to Donkey Kong. Ooh, I don't know, it's pretty cool. Anyways, after that, the Bubble Blaster is a magical gun that charges up and releases a large amount of bubbles on release. Now, just charge time is variable, just like the Javelin, and uses 25 mana every second, which is a bit expensive, but as it's seen for charging up, it caps around half a mana bar when it's fully charged. Now, the max DPS is a whopping 180 DPS, which is huge. Now, personally, I think this weapon is super good. I really like it. It has a unique kind of like effect, I would say, kind of like the Javelin, but it's a lot more useful. However, the kind of whole direction, you can't really turn it anywhere, and they just kind of float up the bubbles. So while it's really close to a 5 out of 5, I would put it at like a 4 out of 5, like a high 4, just because of its entire usefulness. Now, the Shankya summons a stationary whirlpool, which lasts for about 2 seconds for each one, and can be used for a lot of bigger bosses, such as King Slime, and do a massive amount of damage, as its max DPS is around 140. Now, while this has a lot less DPS than, say, the Bubble Gun, or Bubble Blaster, it is a lot more useful, as it, like a stationary item, is still very useful, especially for, like, big groups or big bosses. And since it does have a 140 DPS, it does a lot of damage, killing lots of enemies really fast. I also just like the concept of it as, like, I don't know, it just reminds me of the Magic Conch, to be honest. So personally, I rate this a 5 out of 5, even if it's lacking in the DPS department. Now, the final weapon you can get from this event is called the Mango Jelly Staff, that summons a little yellow/purple jellyfish. Now, these jellyfish have a very unique UI AI for a summon, and have DPS around 180 with 3 jellyfish. Personally, it might seem kind of weird that it has to have 3 jellyfish to get to 180, but considering you can get the Slag Tyrant armor, which means you can summon 3 without even a Bewitching Table or Summoning Potion, this is very, very useful. And I mean extremely useful. And like when it's paired up with the staff, like, you know, the Slag Staff, it does a lot of damage. An example, a really good example of this, is like killing lots of large enemies and large bosses. For example, this King Slime fight, which they just shred. Now, because of its both usefulness, unique AI, and absolute shredding of it, I'm rating this a clear 5 out of 5, as it is the best weapon for this tide, which is a real surprise for a summoner weapon. Now, the only material you get from this event is called Stream Scales, and they are used for making the Stream Surfer armor. This is a magic-oriented armor and has an armor bonus of creating a damaging water spout when you double tap down. Now, this spout lasts only about a second or two, but I think it's a really interesting idea. Sure, I think like the Slag Tyrant armor has better overall stuff, but I do think its set bonus is a little lackluster compared to this, at least. So personally, I would rate this set of armor I would say around a 3 out of 5, as while its set bonus is like more special than the Slag armor, it doesn't have as unique as some, and it's just basic magic armor. Now, a final thing to mention about this is the vanity / decoration from Reliant, aka the trophy and mask, which I think have great and amazing sprites. So kudos to you guys for making those. After defeating Reliant, a message called "The Tide Has Waned" appears and the event ends. Now, many of the items in this event either have a low drop chance or cannot be dropped if another item is dropped, aka the Reliant drops. So it will take a couple of attempts to get everything. I mean, I don't even have the trophy yet, which is one of the best drops to get. Now, to me, this is one of the best and most rewarding events I've ever seen in a mod, let alone in Terraria. You know, besides such things as the Goblin Invasion and the, March of Madness. And I really enjoyed it. Now, if you enjoyed the video, consider leaving a like and especially subscribing to the channel. Believe it or not, subscribing really helps this channel out, as only around 4% of my audience is subscribed, and it tells YouTube that others should see this. Getting rid of that whole, YouTube spiel. Thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a great day. Bye bye.